Okay, so originally, when Pokemon was created, some of the ideas, they originally had Giovanni as a younger child. And the younger child was actually the very first gym leader. This is actually debatable still, like what was changed as far as the appearance. This is what I'm still trying to dig into. Um, I'll give you another example. Sabrina was actually supposed to be the very last gym leader. Again, kind of going back to like how Erica was said to be like the fifth gym leader in Lavender Town, and maybe kind of makes you wonder if anybody remembers that episode of Pokemon where Gary was like kind of taunting Ash with the gym badges. He had like 10 of them, and people say, well, where did he get the other two? Because there's only eight. You see how Pokemon kind of changed a little bit. It kind of makes us wonder, what was really different and what wasn't. But here, we'll talk about this stuff like one at a time, though. So some of the ideas that they had that they changed, Giovanni wouldn't have been the main villain then because he wouldn't have been there at that time. He would have been a different character. They took someone else's design and originally turned it into something else. But I'll put the sprites in here and you can kind of see for yourself. Like other people are starting to say, yeah, that definitely looks like Giovanni, but a lot younger, and you can kind of see how they reworked it. As a matter of fact, even in the prototype, even though it wasn't used, but it was found in the game's data, there's actually an encounter theme called Giovanni. And if you ask me, I think Giovanni should have also had his own battle theme too, because it would have made more sense because he is the villain of the first games. So, in the second one too. So, Team Rocket should have also had their own version, but it kind of makes sense how they recycled that idea because like if you play like the later Pokemon games, like for example, like take like Gen 3 for example, all the you fight like Team Aqua and Team Magma, all the grunts have their own theme. And then as soon as you fight like their leaders, they also have their own theme. So it kind of makes sense, And then Gen 4, Team Galactic had their own theme, and then and then Cyrus, their boss, had his own theme song. It's you see the idea. So basically, this is what we know. Okay, so if Viridian City still would have been like the second town you would have visited, aside from Palatown, so you start in Palatown, you go to Viridian City, and then you would encounter, there's a gym there. So if the gym was supposed to be the very first gym, because what happens in the final versions is the doors lock. So even though it's the first gym you come to, technically, ironically, it's supposed to be the last gym, and that's what they decided on. See, so this is what happens. So unless it's true what they say that there was supposed to be more than 8 gyms and the pre-gym was not really an official gym yet, maybe this is where they got the idea for it. But at the same, maybe there was 11 then. Who knows? One being just a starter gym, and then the rest of them, well, then they'd be the official gyms. But or maybe he was supposed to be the very first gym leader altogether, but they were still preparing for it somehow. So, but they'd still give you a badge for beating him. But who knows though? So basically, what ends up happening is, you were supposed to go in there, fight a bunch of trainers like you would in a normal gym, and then and then even though you don't technically have to challenge them, I mean, you just until you can get to the leader, then you can basically challenge. But the door's locked, so you can't fight him until you fight the. But basically, this is what they decided to do. They decided to scrap that idea, so the pre-gym didn't exist. They took the idea of the main character, and the trainer that was supposed to be the child. They recycled his design. They turned him into Giovanni, and then they turned him into the boss that we know him as Team Rocket. The one that everybody was scared of, made a really good impression, was just really evil, knew where he stood, knew exactly what he wanted. But what were you going to do about it to stop him? That was the kind of talent that Giovanni demonstrated. He didn't tell you everything he was trying to do, but he always led you on that, like if you want to stop him, here's where you find him next. But so basically Giovanni, and it kind of made sense. I think the reason they really did ultimately scrap it is because the next question would be very obvious: is who would the main villain of the very first games be? That if Team Rocket didn't have a leader, it would have been a little bit different if you think about it. And not to mention, even though this is another video for the sake and purpose, but again, Giovanni being the eighth gym leader, Team Rocket and the gym, and Team Rocket's got their secrets, and so is Giovanni. You know, Giovanni always leads you on to believe like he'll have his revenge, and you'll never see the end of Team Rocket. They will come back at some point. You know, he always makes sure of that at some point. But anyways, so Giovanni would have been replaced not as the leader, but as far as the gym orders go, Sabrina would have been the very last gym leader. And from my understanding, I can definitely see why they chose Sabrina, because it is supposed to be where the Sylph League was. Now, here's something else entirely that got scrapped from the games, if you didn't already know this at this point. There was actually supposed to be more content in Pokemon that was scrapped. The Sylph League, as well as the Sylph Co. You know, the same Sylph Co. Team Rocket takes over for the second time. You got to fight your way through all those trainers. You know, it's the Sylph Co. They also had a boss rush in that game, except apparently Erica and I think another trainer weren't compatible, so you couldn't fight them. Or either that was just Erica. But they were all like stronger versions of the previous trainers. You fight your way to the top, and then Professor Oak was like supposed to be the last boss of the game, and then that's where you fought Mewtwo. They give you after you beat Professor Oak, then they give you the right to go find Mewtwo, who at that point was like roaming around in that one area they trapped it off in. And then you'd fight Mewtwo, catch Mewtwo, and then you'd have Mewtwo. And Giovanni, and this would make a lot of sense because, you know, Giovanni tries to go to the Sylph Co, and he even sneaks back in there later on, and then he fights you, and he has like all the legendary birds and all that because he was a different trainer at that time. He wasn't a ground type trainer for the most part. He was actually supposed to be like a bird type trainer, which were flying type Pokemon basically. But here's what's also interesting though. Pokemon, as far as the game design goes, not all Pokemon. I think the bird type was supposed to be Pokemon that were supposed to be related to birds, but like they weren't flying types because they didn't necessarily have feathers. Because, you know, and again, you ask anybody who studies birds or if you've seen birds, you know what birds look like. They got feathers, they fly, but some birds don't. You know, there's some birds like kiwi. I think it's called a kiwi. I've never seen one in person because I don't live in the same area. There's penguins don't live in the same area, so they live in the cold regions. So you got all these different birds that like they're still classified as birds, but they don't fly because they don't have feathers. They either waddle, they just walk, or they get to their destinations other ways. And then you got animals like birds that maybe they do have wings and they know how to fly, but they choose not to. I know chickens, for example. I got a couple chickens in my house. You know, they can fly. I've seen them, but for the most part, they don't, though. You know, they just kind of hang out on the ground, and they're always roosting and perching on a little wire. It's, you know, that's just what they do, you know. Some birds, and then there's some birds that are more likely to fly, you know, like ducks, for example. You know, you'll see ducks flying in the wind and use it against their advantage to land in ponds, and so it's just depends on what kind of animal you're talking about. But I really think that's why they got rid of the bird type. There were too many similarities. So they decided to scrap that all together. In a way, I thought they should have kept it because it would have been like really interesting. You know, you would have had like another flying, it'd be like ground type flying types. Not like solid ground type Pokemon, but a bird that doesn't fly, that, you know, it could be like a water and a psychic type. Like Psyduck, for example. Psyduck is a duck. It doesn't fly, but it was a bird type originally. It was a bird type and a water type. But then they changed Psyduck to, I think Psyduck was just a water type, and then once it evolved into Golduck, it eventually became a water and a psychic type. Or maybe it's just a pure water type. I have to double check. But you can kind of see where they got the ideas at, though, you know. But anyways, it's like the same thing with Giovanni, you know. They took another concept, they turned it into something else, they moved it around, and then we still had Giovanni in the end of the game. So again, most of the ideas were used at some point, but what other ideas there are, I'm still digging into it though, and I have some ideas on like what else to talk about. So Giovanni being the main villain of the series, first villain of the series, and you know, a hell of a good one too if you think about it. You know, you always want to know like what's he gonna do next, and where's he even at right now? Like, you know, is he dead in the if anybody believes the Celebi theory where like you go back in time and fight him in Gen 4, or is he just maybe hiding around somewhere else? Because, you know, he always did say he was hanging low. You know, you even see him like with this mysterious figure and all that. You know, he's like, if he blends in very well, it'd be like nobody would even notice who he is. So what a good way to hang low, you know. Giovanni surely knew how to work in the shadows, that's for sure, as well as not being afraid to strike when necessary. Because Giovanni, he was a really good leader. He had the intentions. He had and even people that worked for him were even scared of him. If you really think about it, like I think there were even a few grunts that even said it themselves. Like they were like they wouldn't even like I remember. I think it was in Gold and Silver or somewhere, Crystal. There were a few grunts there. They talk about how great Team Rocket was, but they said I would never challenge Giovanni myself. And then you had like the basic, like they say we need Giovanni back because we don't have, who's gonna take over, who's gonna rule? Because Team Rocket was all over the place. They were losing faith in their organization because their influence was gone basically. So they basically were trying to rewrite it somehow. But come to find out though, if you play the prototype, Giovanni was there in the original, so it does make you wonder, like, how much different that would have changed the overall outcome. But again, we're still thinking about it, still looking into it. But basically, though, it's interesting to think that Giovanni was just supposed to be like one of the very first gym leaders that maybe he was starting out, he didn't think he was good enough. And then they ended up taking that and turning him into the main villain of the series. Kind of interesting to think about. It's also really interesting to think about who those other two gym leaders would have been. If they would have kept, especially Sabrina as the very last gym leader, because I really would like to know how that would have worked out. I'm still looking into that. There is evidence to believe it, but I just can't find the images. I'm still trying to figure it out. But if I do, I will let you guys know. I think Sabrina was even still supposed to be the psychic gym leader. Again, Alakazam was still her strongest. Sure, her team would have been a little bit stronger too, but yeah, because the 8th gym instead of the 6th, But I mean, physical attacks still would have took her out very easily, so that wouldn't have been really too. Because Alakazam's physical defense really does suck, but if you can hit it hard with a physical attack, it basically already won. In exchange, that its psychic special attacks are really high too, so your physical defense might be high, but not your special defense. If you're using physical sweepers, but again, I guess it really just depends. How Pokemon always was designed like that. So yeah, again, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. We're almost to 1,000 subscribers. If you have any requests or anything you want me to talk about, please feel free. I do take requests because I do think it's a good way to interact with fans, and maybe you might know something I haven't thought about yet, and we can see what we can uncover. Because I'm pretty good at finding things, but I usually need like an idea first. So I think I'm going to talk about the Sabrina video next. I just want to see, like, how different, like, the Pokemon series really has gone when you really think about how much it really had changed. Whether it was the ideas that they scrapped, they just delayed, but they still did use them, or they just recycled into something else at some point entirely at some point, which is really interesting.